So, navigating a changing world. Normally, people think of a changing world as something that you can see with your eyes and hear with your ears and all of that. So, we're used to navigating that kind of changing world. So, I'm not going to talk about that because we already know it's changing. I'm going to talk about the fact that the narrative is changing. And that is quite an interesting thing. Now, what exactly is the narrative? This word narrative is coming up a lot in the vocabulary of different people who analyze the world situation, whether it's socially, politically, religious, and various different perspectives or angles of vision. Narrative means the story. And so there are many stories about what is really going on. And these stories are changing. So I want to look at the change in the story and the impact that it has on us because we are Raj yogis and we are also studying a particular narrative, a story of the way the world is, what the world is, what we are, what's happening, what is the direction of everything, and so on. Now, the stories that we have are represented in ancient mythology. So there is a connection between the ancient mythology and what we are going through at the present time. So the period we're going through is a period of absolute maximum change historically. It's a huge, huge change. And this is very stressful. It's very full of upheaval. And so some people are right in the midst of great upheaval. It may be war, it may be serious impact of climate change, it may be a situation that is we are affected by political changes, changes in laws, which are just happening just like that and changing our circumstances. And so it is very disturbing and distressing. But behind all of that is a story that's changing. So the story that we study in Raj Yoga is very interesting. And I think I'm going to just talk about that a little bit because it's in direct opposition to a number of these narratives that are going on in the world around us. So the stories that we are surrounded by are becoming stories of ever increasing misogyny. And that's not a very good thing. Misogyny means hatred of women. And this is becoming something that people think is okay. It used to be something people used to kind of hide and pretend it's not there, but now it's right out there, which means that the circumstances for women is becoming really difficult. So this situation of misogyny is connected with the reality that the circumstances in the world are getting tighter. Economically, it's getting quite difficult for the Western world. There is a great shift over from the West-centered world to the what is known as the global South. And that is changing things for those of us who are in Europe, America, Australia, the sort of Judeo-Christian centered world is shifting over to different cultural angle on things, and this is distressing and disturbing. And so there is resistance. So I'm going to also talk about how navigating a changing world means that we have to deal with our knee-jerk reaction to resist change, resist hardship, resist pain, resist difficulty, and replace that with something different, which I call transcendence. So shifting from resisting to transcending is also connected with another narrative, which is the narrative that we study in Raj Yoga. So let me talk a little bit about this story, which is a very different story. So our story is represented in ancient mythology in India in three particular ways. One of them is called the story of the third eye. Another is called the story of immortality. And the third is called the story of true Narayan. So what are these stories? They're actually all the same story, but looking at that story from three different angles. One of them, the story of the third eye, is about adopting a different perception or perspective on what we're seeing with our two eyes. So, what we see with our two eyes is that everything is falling apart and becoming more and more difficult. Relationships are falling apart. The infrastructures are falling apart. What people used to expect in terms of progress because of the story of evolution. So we think that everything should, by definition, become better and better and better as time goes by. But now what we're finding is everything is more expensive, more difficult, and the things that we were taught to expect are not happening. So there is frustration, there is disillusionment, there is a need to operate differently, especially for the young people who find themselves growing into a world which is much more hostile than they have been led to believe. And so, how do we use this perspective or perception of the third eye to deal with this narrative, which seems to be in opposition to the reality that we're experiencing? So, the narrative is we're evolving, everything is getting better, we're progressing, we are the greatest, we win over all the problems. And yet the experience is somehow the opposite. And so, how do we deal with that? Now, the story of the third eye, the story of immortality, the story of true Narayan is a story that we are listening to in what we call the period of the confluence age, which is very, very interesting. So, the confluence age is a time of maximum change in human history. Maximum change means maximum upheaval, where things are clashing against each other, and the era is changing. And so when you're in the middle of a change of era, it's very confusing. So the third eye is to see what is going on from the angle of understanding. So the story that we are hearing is a story which says that the world as we know it, civilization as we know it, is coming to a close, that particular format of civilization that we know so well, and something new is emerging, which is very pure, clean, beautiful, and wonderful. And so, what it means is we have to decide for ourselves, am I going to be focused on what is falling apart, or am I going to be focused on what is emerging? And there are many analogies and metaphors which are abounding more and more to help us to do this. And so these analogies are helpful. When we're talking about the third eye, we're talking about seeing through the eye of understanding. When we talk about the two eyes, it's seeing through observation. And so the third eye is a perception, a perspective in which we can see what is not visible, what is invisible to the human eye, but which can be perceived by an awakened understanding. And so what are we seeing here is that we need to let go of whatever is falling apart. However, we are invested in it. We have a lot of ties to it. We have strings of attachment. We are used to it. We're not so willing to let go of our traditions and customs and whatever we have grown up with, because we feel a lot of security in these old things. We know them. And yet the third eye says, well, that may be so, but it's going. And they told you that they were progressing, but in fact, what they're doing is aging. And so aging is different from progressing. Aging means that there is decline. Aging means that things do fall apart. There is less capacity to hold things together, less capacity of integrity. Things become spoiled. Things disintegrate. And so when you're, invested in and tied to arrangements that are not working anymore, that are falling apart, that are unreliable, it's distressing and disturbing. And so we do actually need to cultivate our perspective and perception of the third eye so that we can see, okay, what happens when, you know, if a tree in the forest has fallen down, what happens to it? It starts getting eaten by the termites, and a lot of mushrooms grow on it, and it begins to rot. And it becomes the biomass, which then becomes fertilizer for the new growth. And this is a very suitable analogy, but we need to be able to see that we cannot just take those tree trunks that have fallen down and put them up and stick them in the ground and think that they will carry on growing. They won't. They have passed the time of their life and they become the instruments for new life to emerge. And so the story of True Narayan, the story of immortality, the story of the third eye, is a story which says, hey, now the old story of the world is completed and the new story of the world is starting, and we are in the midst of this period of great, great change. And one of the things that we're seeing in the media and different research and so on is there are a lot of discoveries being made which contradict the established narrative, which is telling us that the ancient times were really primitive and it was populated with dinosaurs for millions of years, and one fine day they all died at the same time. We don't know why, but something happened which was sudden and unexpected, and the world was no longer suitable for dinosaurs, and so they disappeared, and after them came something else. So the narrative of slow, slow evolution over eons is gradually getting replaced by different discoveries which say, the world used to have extraordinary, very, very highly advanced civilizations, which can be detected using some of the new technologies. For example, you can see technologies that can penetrate deep into the earth where you can't just dig it up and so on. Archaeologists take forever to dig things up. But with this new technology, you can look at different areas where there may be indications that something interesting may be there, some stone formations or whatever. And you look down and you see traces of ancient civilizations in different parts of the world which are very, very advanced. And this it contradicts the narrative that we've been hearing through our education, which is saying that no, we are the most advanced, we are the highly evolved people. But then when you look at how we treat each other, that's not necessarily so evolved. And so there's something amiss in the narrative. Now, I just want to introduce here some of the sayings that are there in India, which are interesting because they indicate that somehow all these things are known but forgotten, and they are held together in different sayings, different beliefs, different fairy tales, and so on. So the one that I want to point up here is an expression which says effectively, the world is false, the world is fake, the world is not what it claims to be, and you are fake. And the perception that you have through your sense organs gives you a information about the world that is actually not true. And this is very much connected with the story of the third eye, which is able to see beyond what you can see with your sense perception. So the first thing that the story says, the narrative says, the narrative that's going away says, well, you are a body, and you are either male or female, and the whole world is divided into males and females, and one of them has to be dominant. Whereas the new narrative says actually you're spiritual beings, and spiritual beings don't have a gender. You're a being, and gender has nothing to do with your being. You see. And so, what is a being? So, a being is conscious, a being gives movement to the material body. So, your body is not you. And the narrative that we have been used to is you are a body, you are a male, you are a female, you are this race, this caste, this religion, and that's your identity. And then you die, and that's the end, and there's nothing. So enjoy yourself while you can, and do whatever you want. The new narrative is saying, no, you are immortal. And here we come into the story of immortality. The story of immortality is the story or the narrative that says that no, human beings are immortal. And so you have to take that into consideration, you see. So what that means is, okay, you have a war and you kill lots of people. Every single one of them will reincarnate and come back. But they'll come back with trauma because they got killed, or they'll come back with resentment because they got betrayed. So the energy of negativity in the world is intensifying exponentially because of basically people not taking into consideration that everyone is immortal. And then you see the narrative that we get from the culture is people are basically bad and they're becoming good. Whereas the other narrative, the story of true Narayan, the story of immortality, the story of the third eye, says no, people are fundamentally pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful beings of light. And this is your identity. And what's happening is in the midst of all of this difficulties and traumas and so on that are going on in the world, is this new narrative is beginning to be recognized, to be felt, to be talked about, to be represented in art, in film, in songs. And so the ideas are beginning to come through, and people are questioning, okay, now how should I be thinking? What should I be doing? What is my life all about? What is this world all about? How come this? How come that? And people are looking at different ideas that they have been told which don't compute, which don't seem to fit with their awakening conscience. And so there is a quest going on, a search going on, where people are beginning to feel more than ever that we are being lied to. And that's new. I think that previously people had much more faith in the narrative, even if it didn't quite compute. But something has shifted. A lot of people talk about the time of COVID as being a time of shift, and I think it was a time of great shift because we had something new. We had lockdown. We had this confinement, this situation of being forced to stay at home and not go out, to believe that we were under threat from a pandemic, which is true, but it made people start thinking differently because their circumstances were suddenly different. Suddenly, all these restrictions, suddenly, all these difficulties, suddenly you're stuck with stuff that you didn't need to be stuck with before. And it made people think, it made people communicate with each other differently. It created a situation where people started to, in a sense, rely on each other more than the larger systems of government and big institutions that claim to protect them. But suddenly people felt, no, actually, we have to help each other. And I think that's a very important shift. On the one hand, yes, a lot of relationships are breaking down, and people are asking, okay, why is this happening? And ideas like karma are coming through. People are thinking, what exactly is this? We need to understand karma better. We need to be able to apply these concepts that come from the ancient times and which are maybe misrepresented by the narrative that we have been used to. And now now we are beginning to piece together something of a new narrative. Now, one of the stories I've been mentioning is called the story of True Narayan. So, True Narayan means that you are true to yourself. And most people are not. And this is something that people feel. So many people are beginning to feel the need to do therapy because of stress, because of mental illness happening more and more, because of social relationships breaking down. So more and more is being known about what you have to do to be healthy, socially healthy, have a healthy relationship with yourself, a healthy relationship with your body, to overcome different addictions and so on, because you have to be strong, because you have to take care of you. Who will take care of you? You can't rely on those people, systems, organizations which you thought you could rely on, because these things are failing. They're failing us for different reasons. Some because they can't do what they think they should be able to do. They can't, for some reason. Maybe financial, maybe corruption, different reasons are there. So people are beginning to turn away from these material support systems and begin to investigate, what if I place more trust in the imperceptible, in the invisible, in the spiritual side of things? And so these stories of true Narayan, of immortality, of the third eye, help us to understand these things and to begin to adopt some things which are going to help us through these tumultuous times. Now, one of the things that is greatly needed is stability. And so how do you get stability? Now, of course, we are well educated in science, and science will tell us, if you want to have stability, the best thing of all is something which is spinning. And something which is spinning will hold steady. Like when you ride your bicycle, you are actually using a couple of gyroscopes so that you can stay upright and move along, and you arrive at your destination, the wheel. And there is this question, who invented the wheel? Nobody invented the wheel. The wheel is there already, like the immortal soul is there already. So what is this wheel? And we talk of the wheel of time, and so that means time is something that rotates. We talk about the beginning of time and the end of time as if it were a long line. But although people think that time is an arrow, the other narrative, the narrative of the story of immortality, for example, says no, time is a wheel, not an arrow. Time goes around and around and around. Everything is cyclical. This is new. So people are beginning to be conscious of cycles, life cycles, going back to that fallen tree trunk in the forest. Every tree will continue, all being well, for a long time, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. The great sequoias of North America are 2,500 years old. And there are other great systems which go back long, long time. And then there are short life cycles. And the world that we live in today is a world of great toxicity, which is upsetting the cycles, the cycle of weather. We've been hearing about heat waves, frequent heat waves, unusual heat waves, and some of us are living in them. There are cold waves, storm waves. The climate is disturbed. And the cycles that keep everything running smoothly have been upset by something. And this something, we call it change. Things are changing big time. And this is something that makes people afraid, actually. And so when we look at the story of immortality, it deals with the matter of fear. People like to claim to be unafraid, but at the same time they want security. You know, any advertisement for an insurance company will offer you peace of mind. Is another word for security. But yet, what people find is things are not reliable. There isn't the security, job security, marriage security, educational security, health security. All of these securities are felt to be insecure. So, what does the narrative of the story of immortality tell us? It tells us you will be you forever. And you pass through many things. You pass through ups and downs. Life is ups and downs. Life is light and dark. It's not just only are you having fun, are you successful, and only the bright sunshine. It's not like that. That narrative is actually deceiving you. We don't want to be deceived. We don't like being deceived. We want the reality. We want the truth. But then we have to be able to manage it, handle it. So that means that also we have to get strength. And we don't have to get strength from unreliable external things, which don't have endless integrity. We need to find a different sort of strength, a different source of strength. And when you think about yourself as an immortal being of light who is operating through a body, then you have to start thinking about things differently. Where did I come from? You begin to get answers. Where am I going to? You begin to get answers for that. What difference does I make how I conduct myself? You get answers for that too. And so we begin to consider this new narrative, which puts together the spiritual and the physical, as opposed to the other old narrative, which disregards the spiritual and focuses just on the physical. And people are, so aware that we cannot disregard the spiritual. We disregard it at our peril. And a lot of people are beginning to feel that the difficulties that we are passing through now are partly a consequence of disregarding the spiritual. And so we need to find it, we need to understand it, we need to learn about it, so that we can integrate it into our circumstances, our lives, our relationship, how we handle our challenges, because we're realizing that we just don't have the inner strength needed to manage the challenges brought about by the reality that things are falling apart. So now what? What do we do? And so the story of immortality says, well, the first thing you do is you acknowledge that you are an immortal soul. You cannot die. That is interesting. We go to funerals, we see people die, the cemeteries are full of dead people. But no, they're full of dead bodies, but they're not full of dead people because the person is not the body. So that's a different narrative. I am not a body. I am not a young body or an old body or a male body or a female body or a black or a white or a yellow or a green or a purple body. I am a being of light. And my light has become dim. You see, this is what the story says. Your light has become dim. Instead of it being progress all these millennia, it has been aging. It has been slow decline. The energy of our being has been slowly getting depleted, and we are losing our capacity to deal with the challenges that life is throwing up, especially when life throws up big challenges frequently and we get confused. So, this is the first step. I am an immortal soul. So then the question arises, if I am an immortal soul and the light of my being is getting dim, then how do I get charged up? How do I get my light back again? And this is where the story of immortality connects us with that immortal source which doesn't decline. And this is where spirituality comes in terms of what is the source of the spiritual power that is keeping the world and the people in it immortal. Because if you're immortal and you're declining, it implies that you will fizzle out. But you can't fizzle out if you're immortal, which means you have to get plugged in to a source which will restore you to your original condition. And this then is the Almighty God, the Source, the Force. There are so many names for this, but nobody knows what this is. You may believe or not believe, but you don't know. So the story of the third eye, the story of immortality, the story of true Narayan is a story which gives us information about this unknown, extraordinary power that we absolutely require because we are getting very weak. And there is a spiritual law that says when things are good, you do not turn your attention to the source of spiritual energy. You do not. You don't need it, so you don't. But just as when you're driving along on the freeway and you look at your petrol gauge and you see that you're running on empty, you start looking for petrol stations. In the same way, when the soul is really feeling its depletion, you're looking for that petrol station where you can get yourself gassed up so that you can function properly on full power. And I think the narrative that we have been used to, the narrative of evolution and so on, just doesn't fit with the deep and, in a way, horrified experience that I am running on empty. I have to let go of that narrative because it does not serve me. And so the narrative which is there in the stories of the third eye, immortality, and true Narayan, is that you have to not only know yourself as a soul, but also you must connect with the source, the spiritual source, the force, the almighty, the light, the immortal, eternal, unchanging being of light that is the creator, you could say. And so that is what yoga is all about. So yoga is becoming of interest, a matter of interest. Most people think of yoga as physical exercises or breathing exercises, but actually yoga is actually making contact, like a kind of Bluetooth connection between the soul and the Supreme Soul. And this is done with the soul, the power of the soul. For that, you need the third eye. You cannot do it if you don't have the third eye, because this is a non-material thing. And the narrative that supports this is not a narrative that is limited to the material world. This is a narrative that says you are in the material world, but you're not material and you are depleted. And you have to disconnect from your dependency on trying to fill the hole in your soul with material things, people, places, different addictions that people have. You know how you feel good when you go shopping and you buy a nice thing, but it only lasts 10 minutes or 2 days or a week. And then you're back to this feeling of emptiness. It doesn't work. And so therefore, look at this narrative which says you're forever, you're immortal, you're a spiritual being. You must consider yourself to be that and look within and make contact with yourself and see yourself. Of course, that's very scary. See yourself. Ooh, you thought you were something else, and you find you're a depleted soul. You're hungry, you're thirsty, you need support, you need clarity, and so you turn your attention to that spiritual source, which hears you, which responds to you, which says, hey, I'm here, just connect. And that connection is yoga. So we must be in the soul conscious state, otherwise you can't connect. So it's a two-step process. We have to understand that other ideas actually don't work. You need to know first step, turn within, first step, be conscious. I'm a depleted soul. I have used up my energy. Things are changing. Time is changing. It's now time for me to restore myself to my original condition, but I can't do it by myself because I don't know how. Therefore, it's very important to turn the attention to the Supreme Soul who has the knowledge of immortality, the knowledge of true Narayan. What is true Narayan? Narayan means a man of truth. And how can you be a true man of truth? Man means not male, but a person who claims their identity, a person who claims their power, which could be in a female body or a male body, doesn't matter. But you need to know the information about who you are, what's going on, and how to be true to yourself. And being true to yourself means you recognize that you must be in relationship with the Supreme Being who is unchanging, who is the source of power. And from that connection, you get your power. And once you've made connection, You need to learn about how to maintain and sustain that connection, and also how to use your life, how to operate in your regular everyday life while maintaining the connection. And you have to practice, you have to experiment, you have to do many things, and you have to develop your third eye, your ability to see what is logical, coherent, clear, makes sense, and do not accept things which do not make sense. Just blind faith. Why would you do that to yourself? You're not honoring yourself. So the Supreme Being says, honor yourself, know yourself, claim your rights. You have a right to truth. You have a right to understand yourself. You have a right to become free from your traumas, your bondages, your illusions. Nothing wrong with the condition that you got yourself into, but you don't have to stay there. You have options. So consider your options, use your options, bring yourself back to yourself. Do not sell yourself short. Do not allow yourself to be, deceived and misrepresented and diminished in your own eyes. This is not your honor. And the Supreme Being looks at you as the most honorable, the most amazing, wonderful being who is greatly loved, and says, now come to me and take what belongs to you, take the wisdom, take the power, take the sweetness, take the purity, take all these things which are food for the soul, energy for the soul. Come back to who you used to be, and you will be free. So this is really the narrative that makes sense, and so we're actually in a good position to let go of the old narrative because it's too visibly unreliable and too visibly incorrect. There's too much evidence against it that's been building and building and building, and we have reached a kind of a tipping point where it's really going over to another narrative, the narrative of what is to come and how we prepare ourselves and go through period of upheaval without being afraid, without being confused, go through it with clarity, with courage, with wisdom, and recognize our fellow travelers on this journey who are really beautiful beings, our brothers and sisters in the world, because we are not alone in this, and we will not live alone. A civilization has so many beings in it, but all those beings are finding themselves and restoring themselves to their original state, each one unique, each one beautiful, each one amazing. And so we become the embryo of the new civilization. So this is my way of navigating a changing world. So I'm going to stop there. Om Shanti.